City dropped points to Chelsea in probably the game of the season so far in the Premier League, and I don't even know if it can be beat. I really don't. 4-4, um, the Raheem Sterling, Cole Palmer revenge tour. Ruben Diaz looking like an average defender on the day. I've never seen that before. It was just like it had everything. It really did. VAR was involved. The decisions on the day took some of the headlines. I Anytime City drop points, I'm happy about it. I really am. But it does feel dirty wanting Chelsea to win games or to want them to do anything, because this is the second weekend in a row where I was like, "Come on, you Chelsea!" Like I'm like, "Come on, you need to do something." What did you think of the game? It was exciting, but also like I don't know. I need to get your thoughts on it, because it's hard to even like. It was just so much going on, so much going on.
Yeah, so I live about like 10 minutes from Stamford Bridge, so it's weird because on match day you can feel the buzz, and when I'm walking around on a Sunday doing some shopping and stuff, yeah, you can feel the Chelsea fans getting excited. So I've got this weird thing where I really dislike Chelsea, but as they're like now like a local community, I'm like, up the local team. I can't work out if Chelsea played well or if Man City played really, really poorly. Chelsea have certainly fixed up over the past couple of games. I thought their intensity was really, really good. I think they're much better with obviously Reece James in a back four. And even though I don't particularly rate Gallagher, he's doing a really good job in the middle for them in breaking up play and taking off shots. It's kind of like an old school midfield role.
I thought you would have loved
And
somebody like Gallagher. That's like you
no,
love the average
yeah, no,
guy.
I do love the average guy, but I don't know. There's something about Gallagher that I don't like. I don't know. Maybe it's because he thinks he's better than he is. I'm not sure.
He's
I
not
look at him
humble
sometimes
enough.
and I look at him sometimes and I think you're a little bit like Aaron Ramsey sometimes, where you just get the ball and you just want to shoot and you don't really think about like the bigger picture.
Hmm.
But yeah, and Cole Palmer's obviously started really, really well, like really, really well. I didn't realise how effective he'd been so quickly. He plays for such a young person with not a lot of Premier League experience. He plays with such authority. And the way he manipulates the ball, he kind of stands tall, stands up defenders. Yeah, I've been really impressed with him. And Sterling had a great game against Man City as well. And yeah, and as for Man City, I just don't know if it's like they didn't take it seriously enough, or it's like they thought it would be a walkover. And then when they realised that Chelsea were going to be quite intense, I feel like they were a little bit taken aback. And strangely enough, yeah, as you mentioned, Diaz, in moments they defended really poorly. I mean, that penalty is Mustafi-esque. The way he's just kind of slidden and taken him out, it's really, really poor. So yeah, a really strange game. It felt like if that game was played for 120 minutes, it would have just went back and forth and just 5-5, 6-6, 7-7. But yeah, great result for us. It's weird with Man City, right? Because we know even if they struggle in the early parts of the season, we know they have the ability to go on a crazy winning game streak. Like we know
Hmm.
that, and we can expect it as well. So for me, it's almost like we need a really big gap for us to win the league this year, unless we're going to do the same, which is obviously TBC. But yeah, I mean, City is still class, and when we talk about squads coping with injuries, they're probably the only squad that can cope with injuries. Even though they missed John Stones yesterday, but they've got De Bruyne out, and they're still able to be just as effective. So yeah, good result, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with Chelsea now. Whether this is just a flash in the pan, or is this the start of their rise up the league table? Because obviously, if we go to 5 Champions League spots this year, it could be between them, Newcastle, Spurs to grab it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it was. It's hard. I don't. I feel because people have done this to us so many times, where when we play well against another side, they automatically just say, "Well, we didn't play well in the day." And I do think you have to give the team credit because they made you play poorly. Like it wasn't just like Manchester City showed up, and it felt a lot like our game against Chelsea, where you kind of wanted to play your game and keep it slow and keep it like no, but Chelsea put them in a blender, and all of a
Mm.
sudden it was a basketball game. And Pep and Arteta do not like basketball games. They don't. Like you watch Rodri against a team that wants him to run, that's where you start to see like, oh, this guy does have some weaknesses. Like he's not good when the game gets stretched. They want to keep it half of the pitch, them controlling the match, and Chelsea didn't allow them to do that. I do think Chelsea get up for the bigger games. They've played well against us. They play well against City. They played okay against Liverpool on the first day of the season. I kind of put an asterisk next to the Spurs game because really I think they would have gotten bounced if Spurs had had 10 men. I don't think Chelsea were good on the day. But they do tend to get up for the big teams, but they lost to Brentford the other day. So we have to see, like you said, it's to be determined. But one thing that did really stand out to me that became clear to me or much clearer to me in that game was that Rice, if he's not the best DM in the league, will be the best DM in the league at some stage. I looked at Rodri and I was like, I think he can close that gap. I think he is closing that gap. Like Rodri cannot do the games where the games get stretched. He can't. It has to be perfect settings for him in order to do his thing, and he does it very well. But I even saw like a chart the other day, and I'll plug it in here, where even like Rice's passing is exactly the same as Rodri's. Like in possession, there's not a big gap between Rodri and Rice. But then when we start talking about athleticism, winning the ball back, things like that, Rice can easily close that gap. And he's the only 100 million pound player that's justified his price tag. Watching Caicedo and Enzo, I was like, Rice, he's that guy. He's him. That's it. I just like watching that game, I was like, we're clear. We're clear. How excited are you to still watch Rice play for Arsenal every week? I feel like it's still like not real, but he's taken to Arsenal like a duck to water. Like he's outstanding. Just love the guy so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of signing him, I think it's testament to Arteta and the club kind of getting their reputation back because 2 or 3 years ago, if Rice was at the same age, if that makes sense, I don't think we would have been able to get him. I remember maybe before Grealish went to Man City, there was talk of us and we were trying to convince ourselves that we could get, we could be in the conversation, but we weren't ready. So the fact that we can now go and get Declan Rice ahead of Man City, maybe because we paid the fee, but the fact that he wants to come to us and wants to play for us is incredible. You can tell by the way he carries himself on the pitch, the way he communicates with the media, the way he talks to the fans. You can tell he already feels like an Arsenal player. It's like he's been at us for years. Um, I, I've loved him for years, and it really frustrated me when people didn't see his potential or quality, and they thought he was just like this DM that can't do other things. But I've always thought he could be whatever he wants to be in midfield. If he wants to be a box-to-box goal scoring midfielder, he could be that. If he wants to be a sitting six, he could be that. It's kind of not unfortunate for him, but because football's changed so much and we play a 4-3-3, I think if you had him in a 4-4-2 and he was kind of interchanging with someone, I think you'd see so much from him, so many more goals from him. But because he plays sometimes the single six where he has to be more responsible, or because he plays on that left-hand side eight where you have to kind of just stay in that zone, he's a little bit more restricted. But in terms of his quality on the pitch, his energy and his ability to intercept and then see those gaps and drive with the ball, it's so good to watch. I'm just delighted with him. And the only annoying thing is that we still kind of have this other problem of who plays next to him or who plays with him when Odegaard isn't fit. And that I'm not saying that hampers him a little bit, but it just means you're not seeing the full effect of a Declan Rice. If we did
Mm.
have someone who was ready to step into that left eight role straight away with Declan Rice, I think we'd see so much more from this team. And we wouldn't be speaking about maybe like a stop-start season or underwhelming performances this season. I think we'd be really scoring a lot of goals. But in terms of his potential at Arsenal, I think he can go all the way. And he's the sort of player that will lead you to a Champions League trophy or a Premier League. I feel like he's got this ability to get us back into games. And I
Oh,
was at
100.
Chelsea away. I was at Chelsea away, and we were really, really poor that game. And I'll be honest with you, I was really, really ill that game, and my dad was really, really ill. And it was about 65 minutes in. The rain was pouring down. We were freezing. Looked at my dad, and I was like, "Should we go?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "We're not getting back into this." And as I got home within 10 minutes, and it was 2-1 or 2-2. But I watched the last 30 minutes, and it was Declan Rice like carrying the game. And similar to the Community Shield when we 1-0 down against Man City, I feel like when we have someone like Declan Rice in the team, because he wants to, it's so obvious to say, but because he wants to win so much and he wants the ball so much, he impacts the game in more ways than we can imagine. So even if we're 1-0 down, I always feel like we've got a really good chance to win the game or to get back into the game. I just think he understands the dynamics of the game. He understands like the situations, his ability to read where other players are and to manipulate the ball and play these like quick passes out wide to Saka. It's just unreal. I could talk about him all day, and I don't know the stats to back it up, but I know a feeling you get when you're watching a player who is almost like indestructible. And if he gets injured, Lord help us, we will really
Ooh,
struggle. We will
my
really,
goodness.
really, really struggle because he gives us something that no one else gives us. No one else gives us. He's absolutely brilliant. And 100 million feels like a steal, if that makes sense. It feels cheap because I think he'll go on to do it all for us.
Nobody even talks about the price tag. That's how I know. Like, it's nobody talks about it. He's justified it. It's fine. Like, we're moving on now. He can do anything, and like, you're so right. Like, you're so right about the fact that like he could be anything that he wants to be. And I love that he's very like aware of the type of player that he is. Like, he speaks about what his best position is, what he needs to improve upon. But even when he's playing in the left eight, I still feel like he's super effective despite not being very creative. Like he said, he's not creative. Like he can just do anything. I feel like if you put him up front, he would he would do something. Like cuz he's just that good cuz he wants to. And so I love the player. I love how good he's been so far. And you're right, he's kept us in games and he's gotten us back into games. I think about Manchester City at home a lot because I just think we don't win that game without him in that. I just don't think we win the game at all. Like I just think he's a superstar. And against Burnley, it wasn't really like he had to do a lot. Like he just kept it like he does the basics really well. He was really good and just did like his standard 8 out of 10 type of game. But were you surprised with Mikel went with Jorginho and Rice at home against Burnley? I think a lot of people were surprised that he didn't go with a more attacking lineup with like a Vieira and Havertz around Rice. Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, and I think my frustration with Arteta sometimes comes in not trusting the squad, but I also understand why he doesn't trust some players because we saw even against Newcastle when Vieira came on, there was a few times when he was really slow on the ball and he just wasn't up to the pace. So I think sometimes when you do rotate, then that's sometimes when you get bitten and teams can sense that you rotate and they go for you a little bit more. But I was surprised just simply because yeah, Jorginho playing 3 games in a week isn't what you would have said would have happened at the start of the season. But Jorginho did play well. I think it's more of a sign that he doesn't fully trust the squad players. And I also think it's a sign that we don't actually have a lot of options in central midfield. Like we don't. We've got Vieira, Jorginho, Rice, and then available, right? And then it's Erdegaard out, Havertz, who is obviously playing in that role, but he's still finding his feet. So we're really short in that area. So I really hope we look to strengthen in January because I can't imagine that we can go throughout the season with this many players in central midfield. Because the fact is that when Erdegaard doesn't play, there's a huge drop off. And obviously, some fans like Vieira, some don't. But at the moment, whatever you think of it, how many random assists he get or wins a penalty here and there, when it comes to influencing the game and understanding like the game type and getting on the ball and making things happen, he's struggling to do that, as is Havertz. So I was
Why do
quite
you
surprised.
Oh, just
Go
really
on.
quickly on Vieira, because I like because this was a part of like what I wanted to ask you. Why do you think it is the case that Vieira is not able to impose himself on a match? Like, and in general, why a number eights outside of Odegaard cannot grab the game? You know, because it's so obvious now that it's Odegaard or nothing. ESR is not
Mm.
trusted. Not he's not available. Havertz is there, but he's just like lost. And then Vieira you don't know what you're going to get, but he's never really the main guy. We have nobody else that can be the main guy. Why is that?
I just think it's a sign of how strong the league is, of how fast it is, of how physical it is. And I think it's really, really hard to use previous examples of someone's work and apply that to the Premier League. So it's almost like it's great if you've been playing in Portugal or wherever you've been playing before, Havertz in Germany, and you've been scoring goals. That's great. But to some respects, it almost goes out of the window because the Premier League is like no other. And even Erdegaard, who is now our captain and a wonderful player, he struggled at the start, not to the extent of maybe Vieira, but he certainly struggled to impose himself to get to the speed. I think to play in that left eight or right eight position, I think when you receive the ball, you have to be so sharp. Your first touch has to be so sharp, and you almost, especially if you're smaller like Vieira, you almost have to offset your opponent before taking the ball. So there has to be a body feint. There has to be something to make that midfielder drop off a little bit. And I think when Vieira gets the ball, it's too slow, and he doesn't have the physicality to push someone off. And defenders know they can get tight to him. And he's also, I believe, he's also playing with anxiety, and he's playing with such low confidence that every ball that comes to him, he feels a little bit nervous. Not all of the time, but when there's a ball coming out of the sky and he has a long time to think about it, he might miscontrol it, or someone might get tired to him. There was an example against Newcastle in the last minute maybe of the game where he had the ball and he kept the ball for so long, and then played a really poor pass to Declan Rice, and Declan Rice was really, really angry. So I don't know what the exact reason is, but I know when you look at players who are similar to him in terms of body shape, David Silva, Bernardo Silva, and they're so good at getting the ball and moving it quick. And I don't mean by passing it quick. I mean they get the ball at their feet. Their first touch is like progressive, or if it's not progressive and it just stands still, they do something to allow their space, and then they make the right decision. And with Vieira, I just don't see him thinking quick enough. I don't think him acting quick enough. And then because he is so timid, it means as soon as you give a moment for a defender or midfielder to get tight to you, they're going to go bang. And you can probably see it from a midfielder perspective as well. They can sense a player who isn't confident. They can sense a player who doesn't maybe
Yeah.
want it. And they go bang, get tight to him. And when you look at someone like Ozil, physically he's obviously taller than Vieira. And he got a little bit more stocky, a little bit more bulked up over time. But Ozil was so good at getting the ball and just doing something to offset a defender. And I think Henry mentioned it as well when they were reviewing one of his games many years ago. And it's the ability to not let a defender think you can get tight. So you have to think quicker, move quicker. You have to be constantly moving your shoulders, moving your hips to get that space. And for some reason, Vieira isn't doing that. So I don't know what we do, but there's clearly a lack of trust, because if you're not getting a start at home against Burnley, a team who aren't really the old Burnley anymore, they'll let you play, they'll give you space. If you're not getting a start, that's pretty bad. That shows a lot, especially when Havertz exerted so much energy against Newcastle and against Sevilla. And I think Havertz was poor against Burnley, and the game passed him by massively. But I think that was maybe due to a bit of fatigue than it was to him not being up for it. But either way, he wasn't good enough. But yeah, so I've rambled a little bit, but you're right. We do have a problem, and especially with Thomas Partey being injured, it just means we have this lack of flexibility to rotate. And I don't know what the answer is with Vieira. I don't know. Do we try to play him right midfield more to get him involved? Do we play him left 8 more? Sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I'm very disappointed that he got that red card. Very disappointed because I know it's kind of like unfortunate. There's no malice or anything like that, but it's just careless, and it's a straight red. I know some Arsenal fans were like, "It's not. It just is." Like,
it's definitely a red card. Come on.
it's a red. Like,
But I feel really sorry for him in that moment. I feel really sorry.
Too.
That's like a sign of when things aren't going your way, and you put out a trailing leg. And I think similar to Havertz, we gave Havertz the penalty early on in the season to give him a boost. Vieira took the penalty against Sheffield United the other week to try to give him a boost, and it hasn't really happened. But yeah, a definite red card, and really annoying now because we have some games coming up where you could say, oh, we could start him against Lens. You could probably start him in the Champions League at home. Sorry, you can start him in the Champions League, of course, but there's a few Premier League games where you could have put him in, and
there were
so
some
it's really
games
annoying.
Especially because I think some people with the Havertz performance were thinking, okay, Vieira's coming on now. You have 30 minutes to impose yourself and show that you can play this position. And then he goes out there and gets the red, and it's just like, okay, so now you're out. I hope that Odegaard is back after the break, but it doesn't really give me that much confidence, because if something were to happen to Odegaard, we know we'd be right back in the same situation. I think Odegaard being out has highlighted a really big gap in the squad where we already felt like we had an issue trying to understand what we're going to do between Rice, Jorginho, and Partey if he ever gets fit. Now we have this weird thing too with like none of the 8s except for Odegaard really work. And that's starting to become more and more like a thing. I agree with you. I don't think Havertz was that good against Burnley. If you can't impose yourself against a really poor Burnley side, like you said, that's not the old Burnley. It's just a bad Burnley that's definitely getting relegated. Then when can we trust you to step up?